State championship in the state of Florida is always going to be one of the highest goals that we have. These guys play against each other. The fan bases, alumni bases, they're at it all off season. There's a lot of there's deep meaning to it, so certainly very prominent.
Going to be a big one between the Hurricanes and the Gators, as it often is, as Florida and Miami go head-to-head. Gerhard, and two programs right now that are really trending in the opposite direction as far as this season. And there have been moments in Mario Cristobal's time there at Miami where I did not think he was going to make it past the 0-0 after a game. And there's been a couple moments like that, but a lot more right now for Billy Napier as of late. However, regardless of where you stand in a season when it comes to records, when it comes to in-state rivalry games like this one and like many others in the SEC and beyond, the record, you can throw it out the window because the bragging rights on the line, how it feels to fan bases, what it means to the players in the locker room goes well beyond what a record looks.
Always. It always does, especially in the state of Florida where it's a really unique situation where you do have Florida playing Florida State at the end of the year. Florida State and Miami play, and then Miami and Florida will also play as well. So you have a really interesting dynamic between these three universities that occupy two different Power Four conferences all being able to play. And of course, Simone, the biggest thing, the absolute biggest thing for any of these coaches and players is all about recruiting and who can have the most going, I would say energy and enthusiasm going into the recruiting. And that's the reason we talked a little bit about Dan Mullen and how recruiting fell off a little bit. A lot of that was because of Florida State was piling up a little bit. And Miami has been. And they've all had their cycles, but Florida has 3 national championships. Miami has 5, and Florida State has 3, but none of them have one in a very long time.
Yeah, they're all a little bit dated, no doubt.
It's been a while for all 3 of them. But it does open up a bigger conversation about which state championships do mean the most, because Florida obviously it does.
I love this. Yeah, and when you look throughout the SEC, there's several examples of in-state games that are very, very meaningful. And I think each of them comes with a different dynamic. Some of them are fueled by a deep hatred for one another. Some of them are fueled by just a deep, almost like respect. It's a friendly, like brother, sister, I'll never like you, really, but I love you the type. Like, I don't know, not really love, but you know what I'm saying? You bond over the fact that it's your neighbor and you don't really want to like burn his house down, but you might egg it. You know what I'm saying? You don't want to like hurt the guy, but you might do enough structural damage that he's going to have to, at least write a check that's going to cost a decent amount for paint damage. So I feel like that's kind of what some of these in-state rivalries look like.
You spoke way too specifically about that. It makes me think that this was part of your past at some point.
I egged the house once, okay? I don't want to talk about it, okay? It was not good. It was not good. We also put chocolate syrup on a car. And so, listen, if you've not done that once in your life, you probably didn't live properly as a teenager.
Was this your time at Bowling Green?
It was not. No, if I was doing this in college, Patrick, that was you in college. This was
not
me.
me. Whoa.
This was me as like a 6th grader. This was me in my adolescence, being stupid and doing some ridiculous things because I thought toilet papering was just not enough. Quite frankly, I felt really bad.
You talk about your time at Bowling Green and how much you hate Toledo. I just didn't know if you
that
ever
is
went.
accurate. That is accurate.
Just chuck one.
Might be the best in-state rivalry right there. Honestly, now that I think about it, that's it. There you go. Best in-state rivalry. But really, guys, when you think about the SEC alone, okay, we don't have to look very far from where we're currently sitting, right? Alabama and Auburn, the Iron Bowl, the deep tradition in the Iron Bowl, right next door. The Egg Bowl. Gerhard, we know what that game entails. When you look at the SEC, there's plenty of others, and they're meaningful as well.
Yeah, they certainly are. And I really like the ones that are SEC on SEC, but also SEC on other conferences. Just because we had just Mariah on a moment ago. South Carolina and Clemson play at the end of the year. That's another intra-conference or inter-conference matchup. You also have Texas, which I thought was really interesting because we talked about this with Roger Wallace.
What did he tell? I cannot remember. What did he say about the dynamic between Texas and Texas A&M versus Texas and Oklahoma?
I'm paraphrasing, but he said almost like the Texas A&M one is almost like friendly. What you were talking about earlier.
Okay, that's what it was. Yeah.
It's the egging the house instead of setting the house on fire. Oklahoma is setting the house on fire, and Texas A&M it's the egging.
Listening to that back, that sounds so strong. Like wow, that was so strong.
Honestly, I thought you were telling on yourself to the state police here. It's like, make sure we're not going to put you in federal jail
for like legit vandalism.
The statute of limitations has gone up on that.
Exactly. At this point, I'm too old to get charged for anything. But no, but there's no question, guys. And so okay, I posed the question then.
Yeah.
What is the what's the word? The strongest? Which one is there? One that's more important than the other? I mean,
I have to say, and this is no bias to where I grew up, but it's got to be the Iron Bowl because Iron Bowl has multitude of things. We've seen, unfortunately, some violent issues come from the Iron Bowl, we also
people
have
got shot over people have died over this game not that long ago.
Right.
Like within the last 5 or 6 years.
The passion runs so deep here.
Yeah.
And I think in the state of Florida, you also have to juxtapose it with the fact that, Gainesville kind of shares a football market, so to speak, with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Miami Hurricanes share a market with the
100%.
Miami Dolphins. You have Florida State in there. It is kind of right there in the panhandle. Alabama has no professional sports teams.
Correct.
And that's the reason why that rivalry runs so deep. It looks different from Tennessee-Nashville.
Yep.
Because Nashville's, you split it with the Preds fan base and the Titans fan base. Atlanta, Georgia's the same way. Georgia Tech doesn't feel the same because you have the Falcons there and you have the Hawks there. There is nothing separating Alabama and Auburn because that is their Saturday and that is their Sunday.
Yes.
And so that's the reason why
And
that rivalry
it's their
to me is-
365.
Yes, exactly.
It's their everyday, and that's how this rivalry is. And coming from, so I'm not from Alabama, but I've worked down here for the better part of 15 years, and you see things in this rivalry that you just don't see in other places. I grew up in the Big Ten area in Ohio, so Ohio State and Michigan, and we all sat around, and like half of my family was wearing Ohio State stuff, and the other stuff were Michigan stuff. They don't sit around together. And Alabama and Auburn fans, they don't even sit around together. They're like, you're not even going to go to a, you're not going to go sit at a party being an Alabama fan with a bunch of Auburn fans.
Right.
The Barn,
Right.
the Tide, the Bammers. Back and forth. I've been called both in the same day in the same show before. People can't figure out what it is that they want. But that's one thing about this rivalry, too, is when you come down here, you're not going to go very long living here without someone asking, so who are you a fan of? And if you say, well, I'm not from here, or in my case, hey, I'm not from here, and I work in the media, so I just want everyone to have a good time, they're like, that's not good enough. So choose.
Right.
Just pick one.
I was asked in the first week of moving down
I'm
here.
saying.
Exactly.
And what'd you say?
Precisely.
I
Said
plead
you're
the
not from
fifth.
here?
Yeah,
Exactly.
I'm not from here.
And but Gerhard, you make a great point that we do not have professional sports in the state of LA. I say we because we're based in Mobile, but there's no professional sports here. I think it's why high school athletics matters even more than it does in other places.
Absolutely.
And I absolutely think that is why Alabama and Auburn in the Iron Bowl matters more. Let me add in the fact they actually have had success. No diss on Ole Miss and Mississippi State.
Right.
Okay, and the Egg Bowl is certainly fun, and the guy pretending to pee on a ball and all or whatever it was, whatever.
First thing that comes to my mind,
of course,
too.
the first thing I think of every single time. And there's a lot in watching covering Dan Mullen in those days there. There was very, very impressive football being played. I feel like they don't have the history of success that Alabama and then Auburn, who recently added 6 titles at one overnight. Think about how many national titles these two teams have.
Yes.
It's like 50.
Right.
I mean, at this point, okay, and some of them might be in the same year.
And there was a period of time, Simone, that the winner of the Iron Bowl was either going to go to the national championship or had a strong stake to go to the playoff. The winner of that game was going to determine the SEC
straight
West.
years.
Yes.
For 5 straight years, the
Right.
winner of the Iron Bowl won national title. Then Auburn messed it up, and then Alabama fans acted like they were ever cheering for Auburn because they were like, okay, you guys messed up the streak. Remember this? Remember when that happened? It was like 5, I think it was like 5 or 7 years. That was when I moved down here and started covering the games. I was not mad about it, but it was the 2013
It's like
game.
what's going on, little brother? Come on, you need to
it's
pull
figure
your
it
own
out.
weight.
Yeah, figure yourself out.
Yeah.
Patrick, you're not from here. Obviously,
No.
you've gotten you haven't had a chance to be inside Bryant Denny or Jordan Hare Stadium, and you will this season, no question. But from your perception, you've covered a lot of big rivalries and a lot of big games. You have fandom in a lot of these
Covered
college
a
level
rivalry game that just played last week. I
Yep.
didn't cover that game, but I've covered it in the past. But you bring up a really good point about Alabama not having any professional sports teams. I went to college in West Virginia, and like Alabama, there's no professional sports teams there.
Yep.
So everyone rallies around the Mountaineers or Marshall if you're downstate. But, I think they rely on these rivalries. Obviously, the backyard brawl isn't quite the same as the Iron Bowl because Pittsburgh does have professional sports. But I would argue, actually, I'm not going to argue, it's a fact that they're closer in proximity than Alabama and Auburn are.
Campuses,
Yeah, sure.
I think it's like 71 miles that separate the two campuses.
Yeah,
So,
I
I mean, you don't really see that kind of hate
Right.
in such a condensed area.
Yeah, and the thing is, Auburn is named the closest school to Alabama.
Right.
Mississippi State is.
Mississippi State is,
and quite frankly, a lot of people have noted, hey, this is two sides of the state. And in the state of Alabama, in terms of fandom, you just figure this out when you've covered the teams as much as you have. It's not like it's 50-50.
Right.
I mean, we're not talking about a 50-50. We're talking everybody in Auburn loves Auburn.
Yeah.
And then there are pockets of people who like Auburn beyond that. But because of the Nick Saban effect, because of the history and just everything,
Ryan before
people
that,
just
yeah.
grew up naturally, just kind of going towards the bandwagon
Exactly.
of winning tradition that Alabama has been.
Yes. And also, like, what I loved about it is, like, when you have, like, a sentiment of figure, like a Bo Jackson or like a Mark Ingram or A.J. McCarron, their careers and their legacies are almost defined by that game.
Yeah.
Like, you think about those games with those players.
Yes.
And also, too, I think there's a special thing, and Mario Cristobal talked about it in that soundbite, about how special it is to win in your state lines. Because when you think of Oklahoma's biggest rival, you don't think Oklahoma State. You think Texas. Same thing with Texas the other way around. I know Mississippi and Mississippi State have a rivalry, and they're within the same state lines.
Sure.
However, that rivalry, as you mentioned, doesn't produce the same amount of success. It doesn't produce trophies at the end of the year, national championship trophies, Heisman trophies, and stuff like that.
Sure.
When you take it all into effect, you take success on the field and winning within your borders.
Yes.
That's the biggest thing. I think the only thing that rivals what Patrick just said is Duke, North Carolina in basketball. Not in football, but it's in basketball.
The proximity of that.
The proximity and the success of those teams and those programs winning championships. But on the gridiron, to me, it's got to be Alabama and Auburn.
Yeah, and I do think that when we go multi-sport, because I do think that if we're just talking straight up college football, okay, I think it's hard to rival, literally pun intended, the Iron Bowl. Talk about basketball. I mean, the Iron Bowl of basketball that we've coined, because recently these two teams have actually messed around and been around in the Final Four and actually had success.
Number one overall seeds and all that.
Yeah, that's like fun, and people talk a little, smack and all that stuff. Nothing will ever carry the weight of a Duke, North Carolina when it comes to college basketball.
Correct,
I don't care. There's no argument there, and I won't even entertain the idea. And there are actually several examples of basketball rivalries beyond the Iron Bowl that I think would carry way bigger weight. And a lot of that is, like you mentioned, because of the success of those programs.
Right. And I think you have to marry those two. You have to marry what makes a good rivalry. Two things make a good rivalry, in my opinion. How much, whether it's hate might be too strong of a word, but how much if they're invested in from the fans' perspective, and then how much success do those programs produce? Because we've seen Alabama and Tennessee. That is a rivalry, but that's the second-tier rivalry, and Bama dominated it. You see Georgia-Tennessee, that's a rivalry, but it's a second-tier rivalry, and Georgia's dominated that rivalry. And you had a long time with Texas-Ohio State. Same thing with USC-UCLA. Like, they're a rivalry, but USC has dominated that rivalry, in my opinion. So, like, you have to have so many factors lining up with one another that Florida has. But it doesn't have to the same extent that Alabama has because the Gators, the Seminoles, and the Hurricanes have done it so periodically. They dominated in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, but not much since.
I'm going to make an interesting point here because you can have your top-tier rivalries, and what I mean by that are teams that are always good and they'll always play each other, and, the game will sell itself out. I think a true rivalry is even on your worst year, for either team or both teams, you're still able to sell out your own arena, stadium, or whatever. That'll be a good rivalry, I think.
Yeah, and I think on top of that, and in addition to that, I should say, is that if there is a hope that you can win against all odds, and make no mistake, the Auburn Tigers every year, and I say that because they had more recently, Alabama's had a lot more success. But if you go into that game, and by golly, you're sitting there and you're talking to your uncle and you're sitting there at, 2-7, and you're going to the Iron Bowl and you're looking at your uncle and you're like, I know our record doesn't say it. And Alabama's been number one all year since the preseason on down. And you're like, listen, Uncle Bob, I think this is the year. I think this is the year, and I don't even care what the Tide is favored by 30.5. Because we're going to get it done in Tuscaloosa.
I'll never forget. This is when Gene Chizik, the year of Gene Chizik got fired, when they went, I think, 0-8 in the SEC. That Iron Bowl. You had Auburn fans saying the exact same thing. I was like, we've lost every SEC game. But this might be the one. I really feel it. I really, really feel it.
Man, I'm telling you, there's just nothing like it. Somebody poisoned trees over this game, guys.
Yes.
They killed trees.
Yes.
And then they called Paul Feinbaum to
say
brag
that
about
they did
it.
Yeah.
And then out came the best ESPN 30 for 30 I've ever seen in my life. If you've not seen that what is it, War Tide and Roll Eagle or something like that, some rendition of those two things. Yeah. Man, I'm telling you, and the amount of sports figures, and that's what you just said a minute ago that makes this so special, is that there are sports figures, and I don't just mean Alabama figures and Auburn figures. I mean sports figures.
Yes, yes.
That have been in this rivalry that have then gone on to, pro levels. Or, I mean, think about like a Charles Barkley. And again, I know it's a different sport, but like there's just people that are tied to those two schools that, and maybe I'm getting a little biased here, but I just think that sort of thing is what it just makes things in this state as special as it is.
And I think that's the reason why we said it's compounding. And yes, it does sound biased, but I think if you just take an objective look at college football and college sports, I mean, like this name creates nicknames like the Camback and stuff like that. You just have all these little sentimental moments that really the kick six. I mean, like you just have all these iconic moments that help dictate this part of the game. And like we said, because there are no other distractions from other sports, it gets hyper focused and hyper analyzed.
Yep.
And when you compound success on top of that, it makes a lot more sense. So no disrespect to the Hurricanes and Gators. I'm just saying.
For a really long time, when I was up in Birmingham, the CBS had the SEC. Okay, and there was never a doubt, even in the years, and there were years where Gus Malzahn, going into that game was already out of bowl contention, and it's just it wasn't going really well.
Right.
But there was never a doubt what the SEC game of the week was going to be, what the 2:30 game of the week was going to be, and that tells me that networks even knew that people even outside of the state of Alabama cared about that game.
Right.
People, the Egg Bowl. I mean, people are like, all right, let's throw on the fourth quarter and watch the Egg Bowl finish.
Yes.
Let's see what Florida and LSU are doing. Let's see. I mean, I'm going out of state there a little bit, not in-state rivalries. Everybody's watching the Iron Bowl.
Everybody is.
Everybody's watching the Iron Bowl.
Everybody is.
Yep.
And it feels like you mentioned with the Egg Bowl, I'll say the Egg Bowl's like this. I'll say Georgia Tech to a smaller degree. I'll say Clemson and South Carolina to another degree. All three of those rivalries, it feels like when one team's up, the other one's down.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
It's true.
And you hardly ever have those where it does feel equal
and the
on all
team
sides.
that's down does not have false hope like the Auburn Tigers do. Okay, that is a fact.
So
if I could quantify it, I would.